anyone that comes to, at least I can talk about the US, there are, I would say, a specific set of companies that sponsor your visa. So it's the consulting firms, it's the big investment banks, it's the technology companies. But you have to be mentally prepared that there will be a majority, not majority, but at least a good share of jobs for which you will be ineligible for because they just don't sponsor visa. Don't let a consultant make your application look very similar to another person's application. Like at the end of the application, if you don't feel like what is in front of you is you, then that's a failure of you, of your consultant. I mean, I don't know if it's a failure of the consultant, they still get the money, but it is definitely a failure of you.
Hello aspirants, welcome back to Videshi Chai. Today's episode is particularly special for me as I'm joined by Ashish Srivastava, a friend and former colleague from my ZS associate days, and now a prominent leader at Zurich North America. Ashish's journey from deciding to pursue an MBA at Kellogg to overcoming challenges in the global business arena is filled with valuable lessons for anyone considering a similar path. We'll discuss the struggles, triumphs, and strategies that have defined his remarkable career. Let's start. I love data. It resolves misinformation. Let's talk to experts, analyze news, and smartly plan your study abroad journey. Hello aspirants, welcome to Videshi Chai. Hi Ashish, welcome to Videshi Chai.
Hey, thank you for having me.
You know, we know each other very well. We worked together for a year. We were really good friends. But for those of our viewers who don't have the privilege of knowing you, could you please take a minute to introduce yourself?
Yeah, happy to. So let me go a little bit chronological. So born and brought up in India, primarily Bihar and Jharkhand, and went to IIT Kharagpur for my undergrad. And I did my undergrad in mechanical engineering. While I was at IIT, one of the things I realized is I love solving problems, but I'm not necessarily tied to being on the technical side of things. So as I was looking for opportunities close to graduation, ZS Associates came up, and it was a campus placement. ZS was exciting for a lot of reasons. One, they were doing a lot of cool stuff when it relates to analytics, and I've always been call it math oriented, so that helped. And then it was giving me that opportunity to solve problems, obviously as an external consultant rather than being in an internal role. And ZS was great. I loved my time over there. I was there for about 5 years, close to 5 years, and that's where we met. It was your first job as well, and we joined in the same cohort. And, you know, I have very fond memories of ZS, made great friends, but the opportunity to work across the globe, traveled quite a bit, spent time with so many people, and all that exposure was very helpful. I think what I was realizing is I needed a little bit more than what ZS was offering. And what ZS was offering was a very focused pharma consulting as it relates to sales, marketing, and growth. And while I loved the commercial side of things, I wanted to understand organization holistically. So I went to Kellogg School of Management, and post Kellogg, I joined McKinsey and Company right here in Chicago, and was with McKinsey for about 7.5 years, progressed through the rank. You know, that love for problem solving showed up in some of my progressions as well, I suppose. And then most recently, for the past 8 or 9 months, I've been working as a senior vice president at Zurich Insurance, which is a business insurance company in the US. At the very least, they are business insurance. They also have personal lines, but it's a global company and a pretty large one at that. So hopefully that gives you a sense of my journey and some of the transitions that I've made.
Yeah. Hey, actually, do you remember we actually met on the plane journey from Patna to Pune?
I do. It was funny because the HR booked all of our tickets together, I suppose. Yeah. So when we sat down next to each other and we looked at each other and like, are you going to ZS? Are you going to ZS? And that was an immediate friendship because, but honestly, like, it was great. Like meeting someone right in the flight, Yeah,
Good
fortune
surprise.
case.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
Hey, so getting more serious, and I want to double click on what you're doing currently at Zurich, North America. So you said business insurance, and layman terms, what does that mean? And what's your role as an SVP there?
Yep. So I am a senior vice president of strategy and execution. And my role in SVP of strategy and execution, I would say it's very project based. So in some ways, my team and I, we are deployed on some of the most important priorities for the company. So to give you an example, commercial auto, which is, the vehicles that are owned by companies, they have not been a profitable segment for the entire market. Like it isn't just true for Zurich. So one of the projects that I'm working on is how do we find profitability on that particular product. So that's something that I'm working on. It's one of the high priorities for the company. And working on would require me kind of doing some of the things I was talking about around solving problems, stakeholder management, bringing cross-functional teams together, figuring out what solutions are possible, prioritizing those solutions, and then, working together on the execution part as well. So I am, call it like in the center of all of this, along with some of my business partners, of course, who own the auto book of business or whose P&L responsibility is auto in this particular instance. So that was just one of the examples, but essentially the role is more internal facing, and I am looking at, making Zurich better in whatever project that I've been given to.
Very cool. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah, no, it's fun, keeps us on our toes, and we get to work on very interesting problems.
Yeah. And another part that you mentioned in your introduction was that at some point you realized that you wanted a more 360-degree view of how businesses are run. And that's when you decided to go to B school. Was there a specific moment though where you realized that, hey, now's the time?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there was a moment of epiphany where I'm like, well, yeah, I need to go to business school now. But there were a few things happening at ZS which kind of led to that. So the first was that, 5 years at ZS, I had a great progression. I was what was called, or I think still gets called, a consultant role. And it's a post-MBA role. So several of my friends who graduated from Kellogg and went to ZS went into that role. But I was in that role even before coming to Kellogg. And that role was a lot about, I wouldn't say about just necessarily about selling. There was a big part of delivery as well of the projects. But more so, it was about you understanding the needs of the clients and coming up with solutions, as a consulting firm that could satisfy that need. And I felt that I knew what I knew really well, but there were several parts of it that I didn't really have any understanding because I didn't have any formal business education. There were a couple instances where, the client will be probably like a VP, senior director that I would work with, and we'll have discussions on how my work that I'm collaborating with them on is going to impact their bottom line. And they're going to use, phrases like EBITDA and SG&A and so on. And again, like those terms are not rocket science for anyone to learn. It's just that I had never learned formally what those things are. I didn't have a finance or an accounting background, even the basic one, given my, education as an engineer. So that's when I thought that, listen, like it's time that I take some formal business education. And I wasn't sure at first whether it's going to be MBA or whether I should do some online courses. We didn't have all these online courses available that people have available today. But then the big part of it was also to do with networking and all the personal development that you go through while going through a business school program. So as I talked to my mentors and managers at ZS, a lot of them came from Kellogg, Booth, Wharton, Harvard, all the good schools, basically. And more, I realized that the value of an MBA or a full-time MBA will be incredible to me, personally and professionally. And that kind of led to me applying in few places. I got accepted in few places. Of those, I picked Kellogg and, the the rest I say is history.
Yeah. I mean, why specifically Kellogg? You mentioned other schools as well, and there are.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, and this is something that I tell everyone in terms of business school selection and what they want to do. There are a few things that are very important that I feel as, again, I don't want to generalize how Indians think, but growing up, I didn't think that those things were that critical. And when I went through that experience, I felt that was very important. I think the first and foremost thing is fit. And the way I describe fit is it's something very intangible that you feel and not something that you can be told what it is. And I got a really good feeling of the culture of Kellogg through my interactions with during the admissions process. But then I would have talked to like 5 to 10 people who were either current or former students of Kellogg. And Kellogg has this culture, which is people who have accomplished a lot in their life, but they're very low ego, very ground to earth. And they are also very much willing to help other people. And that's something that really resonated with me. And more I explored, I was very demanding of people, like, tell me what that means. How has that exactly manifested for you? And people told me several instances in which they were influenced because of this culture at Kellogg. And I could say now the same, having gone through the 2 years that I had. But the big point on fit for me was that it wasn't just important for me to be, happy and in an environment where I felt supported for the 2 years. This is the network that I'm going to have for life. So I wanted someone or, a group of people that I felt I belonged to, like that group that I belonged to. So I know I'm spending a lot of time on that, but I think anyone going through the business school process or, just higher education in general should really explore that fit aspect. I think a couple other things also worked out for me for Kellogg. I wanted a general management education. Kellogg has a general management based program, but again, other schools do too. Kellogg had a mix of case and lecture based method. It's primarily case, but there is some courses like accounting where I would have preferred the lecture based, and we had that. So that was also another decision factor. And then, I talked about culture. I think ZS was very similar to Kellogg culture because the two founders of ZS are ex-Kellogg professors. So that culture kind of came into the organization. And as I said, I had a blast at ZS. I have very fond memories. So I felt Kellogg will be the place for me to, grow and to develop. And that's why I picked the school.
Yeah. You mentioned it's been 10 years since you started there. And I'm not sure how much of it you would remember, but this show is addressed towards new aspirants. So one thing that we generally like to cover is how the admission process was like. So if you can remember, whatever you can remember from your admission process, what were the difficult parts? What were the parts that you would advise people to focus on?
Yeah, I do remember some of it. So I'll try and definitely recall that. So I think some parts of the applications would be pretty standard, as I say. So, you decide to apply, you research about the school, and then there's an online form that you have to fill out where you upload your resume. You get a couple references. Some school may require 3. The essays are also, I would say, for the most part, are similar across top business school, but they could also be different. So there was all of that sort of process. And then Kellogg, interestingly, tries to interview as many candidates as it can. So it is definitely unique among business schools in that. And I was interviewed by a gentleman in Pune, where I was for my work at ZS Associates. And the way Kellogg does it is because they allow not just their admissions team and other people in their admissions office to interview, but also alumni. And that was very unique to me because it was another data point for me Because I always say that it's not just the business school evaluating you, you should always be evaluating the business school as well, whether it fits your requirement or not. And then try to think what else was there. And I'll obviously go into some of the details of the essays and references and whatnot. But yeah, probably that's it. I think then you get the outcome, and the outcome could be one of three. You get accepted, amazing. You get rejected, not so great. And then you get waitlisted, which isn't the end of the world. In my case, I got directly accepted at Kellogg, but at a couple other one other business school, I was waitlisted. If you're waitlisted, you provide some additional essays, or I would say some kind of collateral. I don't know what it looks like. Different schools have different things. They want you to fill different forms. They want you to tell more about why would you be a good fit and that you should come off the wait list and so on. And then, then there's the usual sort of financial deposit, visa, financial aid, get a loan and things like that. So that's the process that goes in afterwards. So overall, I would say the process does take a significant amount of time. And I would say a lot of people focus so much on their essays and their references. I would say, yes, that's a good thing to focus on your essays, because again, those are very, very important and you need to show your personality. References just as critical because you want someone who can truly talk about you, not someone who's very senior, because someone who knows you really well is more likely to give a good reference for you. In my case, both the people who referred me used to work at ZS. They were my managers, and they have known me for years at that point of time. The other aspect is, and again, this is something I've seen, is sometimes the person who's referring you, who's your reference, they may ask you to write the reference for them. I would say that don't do that, or at least, have a discussion with them on the aspects that you want them to highlight, but at least have it in their words, because admissions can sniff out if you yourself have written that for them. And then you asked about sort of some of the learnings or some of the things and tips that I would give. I think the part that I think a lot of people underinvest in is the rest of the application. So as I mentioned, there is a portal, and the portal asks about your hobbies, your awards you've won, countries you've traveled, or languages you speak. And there's a whole bunch of other details, I would say. And a lot of people start on that application form 24 hours before submission, and they spend all this time on all the other stuff. What I say to people, and this is true for business school for sure, is you have limited real estate. Like essays have word limit. The portal, when you're going to fill out the form, there is word limit. You have to make the most impact in that real estate. You have to figure out how deep you want to go on certain aspects. And you have to figure out how do you want to show the other facets of your personality on the other places, right? Use the full space. So if your essays are highlighting certain qualities and you think certain other qualities like, I am fun and I love to read books and I am passionate about world politics, whatever it may be. One of my friends wrote about how much he loves tea, which, I feel like I could have written too. But the point I'm making is you should use the rest of the space to have your personality come out because business schools aren't admitting a resume, they are admitting a person. And they want to see that personality side of you more so than anything else. One of the favorite essays that I had written for one of the business schools was where I had talked about my upbringing and how it was very similar to Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes. And it's the most randomest thing, right? And I loved Calvin and Hobbes. I was introduced by Jaya, one of our friends at CS, and I was immediately hooked. I still have the book here, actually. So, I mean, it was something that I loved and, I could relate to Calvin. So why not? I will write about it and it made my personality shine. So anyway, it was a long answer, but hopefully it gives you a flavor of like what the process is like and what some of my advice is for people to stand out.
Yeah, that's great. And I know you're involved in admissions as well. And there,
Yes.
specifically for the most common demographic for the folks coming out of India, male, techie, what can this demographic do to really stand out? As you mentioned, limited real estate and all. But what are some of the key things that they should focus on to stand out from the crowd?
Yep, absolutely. So, just to give context to other viewers, when I went to Kellogg, I decided that I want to be part of the admissions team, and I interviewed and all of that with our admissions officers. And I was part of the process for 2 years. So, I will read the full application. And when I say full application, it basically included references, essays, GMAT score, resumes, whatever you filled on the portal, and interview reports and everything else. And then I'll be the first person making a decision on that profile or person, basically. So I was quite close to the process. Now, coming to sort of your question of some of the common demographic that we see from India, the Indian techie, probably male. That's also one of the stereotypes that a lot of people think about. I would say a few things that you should think about if you think that you don't have a good chance. I think first and foremost, my advice will be to not underestimate what you bring to the table. Because the thing I was talking about prior, you are a person, you're an individual, and you are very different than the other person next to you. Like, Janish, you and I have known each other since 2009. It's a long time. Yeah. We've had similar education, similar upbringing, both went to IIT, but we are very different people, right? Embrace that individualness and make sure it comes out in your application. Tell people what you like. Tell people what is interesting about you. Tell people why you should be the person getting admitted versus, the other person. So embrace that is what I will say.
Yeah.
The second thing that I will say is that show that you are genuinely interested in that school. And there are different ways in which you can show that. You should go out and talk to as many people as you can find. And, sometimes it can feel intimidating sending a cold message on LinkedIn to people that you don't know, but that's what I did. And even if my hit rate is, 25%, that's fine. Like, I got to talk to one person out of four. That's absolutely okay. As you get to know that school better and better, that will come out in your application, that will come out in your interviews. And you have to make sure that comes out, right? Like I can say for literally any business school that, hey, I'm interested in your clubs, or, I love the courses that you have. And that's not going to make you stand out.
Yeah.
If you are into outdoors hikes, just tell them I'm interested in that hiking club. Or I don't see that there's a hiking club at your school and I want to establish that hiking club. Not unlike most Indians, I loved cricket, and there wasn't a cricket club at Kellogg. So we started a cricket club over there, and I wrote that as part of my application, right? Like, and I was not ashamed of it or anything. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, this is me, right? Like even today I watch so much cricket. So the point I'm making is, again, like, when you get to know the school, you will know what is there, what is not there, and accordingly you can sort of tweak your application to do that. The final thing I'll say is that there are things which are sort of table stakes. So, your resumes, your essays, and things like that. You should think about how you want to position yourself, and that's very important. So, Indian male techie, let's take that stereotype, right? They're all very different. So you may be very good at communication, or you may be really good at the analytics stuff, or, you can be really good at people and stakeholder management, or you can be someone who has an interest outside of work on advertisements, making it up, right?
Yes.
Make sure that aspect is very clear so that, when an admissions team member has gone through the application, they see that, oh yeah, this person, they will really stand out in these 2, 3 dimensions. So there are ways in which you can position an application. Most of the time, again, this is what people think, because business school want a diverse classroom, but diversity is not just from your country. Diversity is not just from your gender or your work experience. Diversity comes from diversity of thoughts, diversity of life experiences, diversity of personalities. And I think those are the things that I would encourage people to think more about and less about things that you cannot change.
Yeah. I love that answer. A lot of powerful stuff there. And I know some of my friends and maybe some of your friends as well took the help of consultants to write their MBA applications. And as an admission committee member, how is that viewed by business schools? And is that advisable? What are the benefits, downsides?
I mean, my honest answer is I actually don't care.
Yeah.
Because again, I never went into reading an application thinking about, hey, I should be on lookout on whether they wrote it themselves or
Yeah.
they took the help from a consultant. Never.
Yeah.
And I don't recall any instance in which I was like, oh yeah, this must be a consultant. So I should reject this person. Like I feel that even if a consultant is helping you, it should be your voice. And I was looking for that genuineness, if that makes sense, versus, looking for something which was a cookie cutter or an applicant thinks is something that I would want to hear, so to speak.
Yeah. So it's more about how, if you're using consultant, how you use that expertise and to build and bring your individuality out rather than if or not.
Correct. And listen, like consultants are helpful. Don't get me wrong. In certain things. So they have seen students go year over year through this process and whatnot. Right. And again, I'm not going to name any names, but when you enter the business school application process, a lot is unknown to you. So if you want to gain a lot of knowledge from someone else's expertise, they are a quick method to do that. They would have also seen, plenty of applications getting accepted or rejected, and hopefully have learned lessons through that. But at the same time, the only recommendation that I'll have is don't let a consultant make your application look very similar to another person's application. Like at the end of the application, if you don't feel like what is in front of you is you, then that's a failure of you, of your consultant. I mean, I don't know if it's a failure of the consultant, they still get the money, but it is definitely a failure of you, because the whole idea is that, business school wants to admit you, not you and your consultant.
Yeah, love it. Right. Let's talk about your experience at Kellogg. You talked about it highly, blast is what you said. Let's double click a bit on that, and also if you can take instances and learnings from that and generalize it as guidelines for incoming MBA students or incoming study abroad, higher education students. What can they do to maximize their returns, if you will, from overseas education?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I get asked that in multiple situations. I think the first and foremost thing that I tell people is prioritize. Business school is an incredible place. And at every point of time, there are n number of things you can do. There will be some wine club doing wine tasting, and at the same time, the healthcare club is hosting a happy hour. There is some lunch and learn going on at the same time on a topic that you may be interested in. And there's literally, it's buzzing with activities. So my recommendation to people is, you figure out what is it that you want to get out of that experience, right? You can, yes, everyone wants a job. So yes, your experience could be, yes, I want to get a job. In which case, yes, that takes the first priority. Like that's what you're doing. In some instances, it's like, yes, job and courses are my priority because I don't have a formal education. So I really want to focus on my courses. It could be networking, it could be personality development, leadership abilities, it could be a whole lot of things. But once you prioritize, everything else is going to go from there. So for me, for example, I came with a lot of analytics. I have an engineering background. So my thing was that this is quite funny because what I wrote in my business school application essay is what I want to do after business school is exactly what I ended up doing, because I was very clear right from the very beginning. And by the way, like, I'm an anomaly. A lot of people, whatever they write, they probably don't end up doing exactly that.
Sure, yes.
But to me, it was so important that, when I reflected, that's what I want to do, and that's what I did. And that also helped me prioritize. My priorities were I wanted to have my own personality development. So, taking as much of leadership courses, understanding as much of how do I influence people, sometimes without authority, how do I inspire people, how do I manage difficult situations? Because I have, at least my personal belief, have always been that, PowerPoint, Excel, or any of the hard skills like, coding or SQL or whatever, you can learn that. But some of these softer skills are very hard. And if you can master those, then, you can have a bright career. And that's why I focused quite a lot on that. Not to say I didn't take the courses that I wanted to or the things that I was interested in. Yes, absolutely, I did. But that personality development prioritization also permeated into some of the things I did outside the classroom. So the clubs that I joined, or, the travel that I did. Growing up, the only exposure I had outside of India was coming to US for my internship when I was in IIT. So one of the priorities for me was that I want to get to know my friends at business school. I want to understand, what their cultures are, how have they grown. I also wanted to travel a lot. So one of the quarters at Kellogg, I did a study abroad program at INSEAD, which was, by the way, a great experience overall, because INSEAD is a lot more diverse than any of the USB schools. But then that allowed me to travel within continental Europe. While I was here in the US, I traveled quite a bit domestically, but then, Latin America and Central America and so on. So all of that was because I knew what I wanted. And I tried to not get FOMO, fear of missing out. I was only involved in things that I knew I was passionate about. So admissions and, some of the clubs that I wanted to. So anyway, my big advice to maximize your ROI of business school is figure out what you want and just do it. And figure out what you want at business school is very different for different people, but you should not feel like, oh, I missed out on X, Y, Z, because you are the one who's made the decision what's important to you.
Yeah, that's great advice. You mentioned right after B school, you ended up doing what you wanted to do and stated in your business school essay, which is, working at one of the top consultancy firms, McKinsey. Can you walk us through how you secured that job? And I know one thing that's important for our viewers to realize, that's most US schools and most schools abroad, they don't have campus placements like we have in schools in India. So with that context and background, what was the process for you to land that very interesting and lucrative job? And did you face any challenges in, finding the job and then later in the visa stage, which can be a challenge, especially with the non-STEM tag attached to the MBA degree?
Yeah. So the experience was quite different than what the experience would be if I were recruiting in India, or, my IIT experience, if I contrast versus that. So to back up, what I wrote in my business school essay is I want to do work on the growth side of things in organizations as an external consultant at a top consulting firm. That was and wanted to use analytics. That was one of the things that I highlighted about my profile. So anyway, that was my pitch, or what I wanted to do. So when I was doing, first comes the internship recruitments, which, again, I recommend that to everyone to test out, what is it that they think they want and whether the reality meets the expectation. So in my mind, I recruited for, some of the top firms during internship as well. Things didn't work out. And, that's when I decided to take a step back and think about, hey, what have I enjoyed in the past? And one of the things I had enjoyed in the past was when I had joined ZS in 2009, and it was 200 people. And that 200 people grew to 5,000 in 5 years. And what I had really enjoyed in my time at ZS is growing a small company to a big one, but then that allows you to wear multiple hats, that gives you responsibilities that you wouldn't already get and things like that. So instead of me thinking about plan B and, what is it that might work out, I started networking at smaller consulting firms, but that were focused on growth topics. And that's how I got my internship. Now, the downside of a small company is, of course, what you said is not every company sponsors visa for international students. Now, interestingly, this company was sponsoring visa, but what I thought is during the internship, while I enjoyed my internship, what I thought was that the breadth of projects that they have and the things that I can do are very limited. Like it was a 18-person company, including the 3 interns or 2 interns that they had, and probably 8 or 9 ongoing projects at any point of time. And you are kind of bound by what kind of work you can do. So that's when I thought that, for my full-time recruitment, I'm going to go back to the big consulting firms and see if that works out. Fortunately, it worked out this time. In McKinsey specifically, I recruited for the growth marketing and sales practice because that's exactly what I wanted to do, right? So McKinsey had those practices like ops practice and so on. BCG have been, I don't know about these days anymore, but at least at that point of time had a very generalist approach. So that was that. And at that point, my thinking was that, I want to do this for 2-3 years and then see if I can transition into, like the revenue side of one of the Fortune 500 organizations or a company that I'm passionate about or interested about. So when I got the offers, and this is a great phase in life, once you have the offer and you're evaluating offers, because all these consulting companies, they have spent so much time and energy on you.
Yeah.
So they wine you, dine you, but then also try and show you kind of what it would be like to work for them. And McKinsey was telling me that you can spend 80% of your time on commercial topics and you have the flexibility if you want to go out, try, operations, cost cutting, any of the other stuff. And I'm like, no, I don't care about those stuff. I want to do 100% this. It turned out that I did it, but genuinely was interested in that. But anyway, at that point of time, I did 100% of my work on commercial side of things. The other BBs that, I had offers from, they were saying that, listen, we understand what you want. However, our model is the generalist model. And I thought that, if I'm going to be in consulting for 2-3 years, life is too short to work for 6 months or 3 months or even 4 months on a topic or something that I'm not interested in. So I was like, you know what? McKinsey is the choice here. And I ended up doing that exactly. Like at McKinsey, I think first 3 years, maybe 3.5 years, I only worked on commercial topics. Like McKinsey had the flexibility. McKinsey has amazing flexibility in terms of your project, but I ended up doing all of that. I do want to touch upon the visa aspect of things because that's important. Anyone that comes to, at least I can talk about the US, there are, I would say, a specific set of companies that sponsor your visa. So it's the consulting firms, it's the big investment banks, it's the technology companies. And then in addition to that, there are a few companies here and there, call it general management, marketing focused kind of companies that might sponsor you. But you have to be mentally prepared that there will be a majority, not majority, but at least a good share of jobs for which you will be ineligible for because they just don't sponsor visa. So that's at least coming out of the business school. That's something that you have to keep that in mind. But I don't think that anyone should ever make decisions based on visa. And this is a session that I did with 4 of our alums. if you show your value to the hiring manager, even if that company has not sponsored visa in the past, they will find a way to get you in. And if you're at a top business school and if you show the skill sets that you have, like you're in a much better spot than a lot of other people. Now, you may not be able to show that value directly coming out of business school, but few years post business school, if you're doing a job search, you should not restrict yourself to, oh, has this company sponsored visa in the past? Yes, no. And that's how I will find a job. And then the final thing which you asked about the differences, the finding a job in the US is much more networking focused. So it isn't like, hey, McKinsey comes on campus and they're just gonna like shortlist me and hire me. I would have probably talked to 18 to 25 people like at McKinsey in different practices, different offices. And, yes, they have an on-campus representative. They have recruiters because, Kellogg and all the M7 schools are target schools for them. But you still have to network to understand what is it that you want and where will you fit.
One thing that's been in the news, unfortunately, is that a lot of consulting companies, especially top ones, have been laying off staff in relatively large numbers. And, naturally, the consultants that are exiting these companies, they'll have to do something to stay relevant in their careers. And also aspiring consultants, folks who are currently in B schools or in, undergrad schools and wanting to start their career in consultancies may even get a bit scared and iffy, okay, so what's happening here? So what would your advice be to folks in these situations, especially the ones who are aspiring consultants? What can they do to kind of plan for the future and stay relevant in this new age?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And one of the things, first and foremost, I'll say is don't be scared. If you act from a place where you are fearful, people make decisions that are suboptimal for them, but because they're making it out of fear, it's probably not the best decision for you long term. Yeah. So first things to realize is consulting is not the end of the world for anybody. Okay. Like if I would not have gotten into a McKinsey, I have a lot of friends who didn't get into, MBBs or even the top consulting firms, and they are doing absolutely fine. So stop defining sort of success as status or a company or something that, if you will achieve that, you will be happy. I think maybe I'm getting a bit philosophical in that, but don't do that. Having said that, I think what I'm realizing more and more is consulting companies are valuing expertise, and that's what you should keep your mind towards. And everyone brings a different kind of expertise. I think your expertise should be something that is relevant, and you see that being relevant in the future as well, right? And I've said this before on this meeting as well, is that some of the hard skills are easier to learn, like the Gen AI. If I wanted to learn about that, or Python or whatever it may be, yes, I can put few weeks or a few months into it and I can be really good at that. So don't ever think about, hey, I should not ramp up my hard skill. Yes, you should definitely do that. But then if you want to be a successful consultant or a successful professional in general, I would say, developing a strong network, being aware about things that are going on in your field, developing an expertise, the ability to have conversation with people in general, not just on your area of expertise, like how you show up, your mindset, all of those things become a lot more important. And I would say those are more of me an indicator of success. Because if you're intrinsically motivated, you will learn everything that the job has to teach you. So if consulting didn't work out and you ended up being a product manager, even though you've never done product management, you will learn that. If you are a person who's interested in learning, if you've never done insurance, if you decide to get a job within insurance, you will learn insurance in a few months. That's not what is going to differentiate you. I think what will differentiate you long term are a lot of these soft skills, and I cannot emphasize and re-emphasize from our earlier parts as well, is an aspiring consultant should look to have an overall personality that's personable, that's compelling, and that you show up in a confident manner. I think those things are important.
Yeah. Yeah. And that resonates with me a lot, right? So essentially, through conversations with others, by showing up, as you mentioned, you find new opportunities. And then the next step is to grab A and B, learn from those opportunities, especially the ones that you have fun doing. So build up your hard skills in those dimensions and kind of do what you earlier mentioned, see, become experts. And that's how you find new domains.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, a very simple example, which is top of mind for me, my current job at Zurich, there was no job posting. There wasn't a job opening as well. My friend introduced me to my current boss. I talked to her and we hit it off. And she was like, I want to hire you. And that's how I am in this shop, right? And again, I was just genuinely curious about Zurich and all the things that they are doing and what's going on with the company. And, can I potentially fit in? Because I was looking to leave McKinsey. But by no way, I didn't decline that call, and I didn't decline any call. I would talk to more people because you have to be innately curious. So don't look at, at least my perspective is, I wasn't looking at networking as being like a thing that I should be afraid of. It's more of a way to get to know people and meet interesting people. And it worked out.
Yeah. Yeah, Ashish, this has been great. I've had a lot of fun doing this podcast with you. And thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure our viewers are going to benefit a ton from watching this. So really appreciate it.
So thank you for having me. Took me down the memory lanes. And of course, we'll catch up offline as well, Janish. But appreciate you having me over.
Thanks.
Cool. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Cheers, bye. Thanks for tuning in to Videshi Chai. Ashish's story shows us that with clear goals and persistence, navigating the global stage is not just possible, but rewarding. If you have any questions, share them with me in the comments below. Stay tuned for more such podcasts. Stay informed and stay inspired.